Who here has a Facebook? Let me see some hands. Now, who here is on Facebook right now? Facebook has become a cultural phenomenon. It has become ingrained in our daily lives. It all began in a Harvard dorm room. Mark Zuckerberg and his friends had an idea that would revolutionize the internet and the world. However, even as global as Facebook has become, there are still some countries that haven't been as receptive, mainly China. I'm Arya, this is Gabe, Ashley, Jared, and Nick. We're Team Facebook China, and today we're going to be talking about Facebook's entry into the Chinese market. So, in order to establish our entry strategy, we followed a formula we call cruises. We conducted a situation scan analyzing the potential market. We reviewed key issues, uncovered objectives, illustrated the strategy taken, stated possible alternatives, established a marketing mix, and lastly, we're going to summarize our actions taken. So Facebook today. Facebook has over 500 million worldwide users and is available in more than 180 different countries. Facebook has become so popular that there was even a movie made about it called The Social Network. Now, the tagline to The Social Network was, "You don't get to 500 million friends without making a few enemies." This is almost a foreshadowing to our future relationship with China.
All right, now, in evaluating the market we're entering, the first most important thing is to evaluate the nation itself, which in this case is obviously China. The first thing anybody will notice about China is that it's got 1.32 billion citizens, making it the most populous nation in the world. This makes it attractive for any business, especially Facebook. The entire nation is run by a communist single party. The Chinese Communist Party is the sole control and is not affected by any competition or any alternative views. And they focused on keeping a rigid trade policy to protect domestic businesses. However, recent free market trade reforms have recently opened up the market a lot to increase loads of FDI. So it's a very attractive market for foreign direct investments, and many have come in, creating a massive GDP growth. As you can see on the graph here, China's the red line, which you can see projected to surpass United States, India, and Central Europe.
China's online social networking market is very saturated and already well established. While there is not one dominant site, we've analyzed 4 domestic competitors in an order from largest but least active to smallest but most active is Qzone, RenRen51.com, and Kaisen001.com. As an introduction, Qzone is for young teenagers and those who like to game. RenRen is originally targeted for university students. 51.com is for rural inhabitants and those who like to game as well, while Kaisen001.com is targeted towards young white-collar workers. There's only one foreign competitor that dominates the Chinese market, which is MySpace, and they've already gained access into the online social networking site in the country.
For our target market, we decided that it was important for Facebook to look globally and even then focus on its domestic market in the United States, where they've identified a key market segment as educated, as you can see here, 18 to 24-year-olds, as you can see here. We can use this information to move into China, identify the same target market, but also include Chinese cultural elements. 3, collectivism, the teaching of Mianxi, and the preaching of Guangxi, which I'll explain in a minute, are all important elements to consider when we target this 18 to 24-year-old segment. Collectivism, as I'm sure most of you know, represents the consumer's need to be part of a larger community, a larger group. Mianxi discusses, more specifically, face value and how Chinese consumers will likely make purchases in order to gain recognition, something that Facebook gives them an opportunity for. And finally, Guangxi, discussing the importance of social networking, and even business networking altogether, which once again, as I'm sure you all know, Facebook accomplishes. We also looked further, and we said it's not only important to discuss the target segment, but because of the complexity of the Chinese market, legal, political, and economic imbalance in landscape, we needed to conduct a complete stakeholder analysis, where we used power and interest as metrics to design how we can involve different constituents in the decision-making process. We look first at primary constituents, those outlined in color, such as the Chinese government, Facebook, and employees of Facebook, in addition to shareholders, who will be regularly involved in the decision-making process. Additionally, we look at secondary stakeholders, such as those with high power and low interest, and high interest but low power, such as competitors Qzone and RenRen that Ashley identified earlier, so that we can be sure to monitor their business practices but won't necessarily need to dedicate too much attention to them. And finally, we look to our tertiary stakeholders, such as the Chinese Ministry of Information, so we can do our best to meet their expectations but won't overwhelm them with routine information. Completing our market attractiveness assessment and our stakeholder analysis gave us a better idea of what kind of issues we would face when we move forward. For example, we first identified the Western stereotype. By this I mean that Facebook is, by all definition of the word, a corporate giant, and there is definitely a concern that many other Western companies have entered the Chinese market and attempted to impose or even superimpose their product and service, something that Facebook will not do with this strategy. We also look to experienced social networkers, being a difference because when Facebook launched in 2004 in the United States, MySpace was the only competitor and the social networking industry as a whole was significantly less developed. So we look at China now with 4 main competitors and MySpace, in addition to sophisticated consumers, making it a much more difficult market to enter. And finally, we look at government barriers as the primary source of issues and concerns that we'll have moving forward. For example, their need for control and their concern with the lack of privacy.
Now, in order to be successful in China, Facebook must accomplish 4 main objectives. Facebook must become a legal player. They must develop operations infrastructure. They must capture significant market share. And they must also remain flexible and prominent. Now, there are 3 stages of achievement in meeting these important goals and objectives. The first being establishing market entry. The second, producing a successful marketing mix plan, and third, sustainability in the Chinese marketplace. The most efficient and successful mode of entry for Facebook in China is the use of a joint venture strategy. This strategy allows Facebook to gain rapid entry into the market by overcoming government barriers and also gaining important knowledge of local Chinese consumer preferences and tastes. Now, when deciding which firm to partner with, Facebook must take 3 important elements into consideration: strategy context, strategy control, and strategy operations. We believe that the best social networking site for Facebook to partner with in China is Kaisen 001. Kaisen 001 is already known as the Chinese Facebook, as it not only mimics many of Facebook's operations, but also its applications and user interface. Kaisen 001's target market is also extremely similar to that of Facebook's. Another extremely beneficial factor that comes with partnering with Kaisen is that Kaisen's public image is positive amongst government officials and Chinese consumers.
All right, now in pursuing a joint venture with Kaisen, we do realize that we have to make sure that Facebook maintains a large degree of control over the final brand strategy and the final approach to the Chinese market. So as you can see here, we've identified 8 key points where it's important to create a balance between Kaisen's power and Facebook's power. And you can see, especially in places like management, we've evaluated that Facebook, it's very important for Facebook to have power in that area because Facebook needs to have a final decision on the general brand strategy and operation of how the brand is seen in China.
Now, while there are other potential alternatives for entry for Facebook in China, they do not provide the same degree of success. A licensing agreement would allow a local partner to use Facebook's service in exchange for royalties. However, as Facebook's product is intangible, these royalties would be based on advertising costs and could produce a minimal profit margin for Facebook. Also, Facebook would be giving their local partner knowledge of Facebook's know-how and core competencies, which could pose and be dangerous in the future. After achieving government approval, Facebook could try to enter the Chinese marketplace by the use of a wholly owned subsidiary. However, wholly owned subsidiaries come with extremely high startup costs and high levels of risk. And in China especially, many Chinese government protectionists and consumers have negative attitudes and feelings towards wholly owned subsidiaries, especially ones from the United States, as they believe their only goal is to try to promote Western ideals.
In pursuing the actual markets